So thank you very much to everyone who is here. Is Sydney doing another? Oh, there she's there. Okay. So for those of you that don't know I see some new faces, probably from the environmental activist community. So welcome, welcome. My name is Shirley Varico. I am the director of visual arts here at Buffalo Art Studios and the curator. I am the person that sent blind emails to some of the folks on the panel who gladly agreed to be here. And here at Buffalo Art Studio, we're a not-for-profit art center. We're 20,000 square feet, so you're in one really small part of what we do. So I would encourage those of you who are new to us, follow us on social media, get to know us a little bit. We do have catalogs for both the exhibitions today, and I see many of you have the bio information, the biography for each of our panelists. One of the things we don't do here are lengthy resume readings like academia. You guys can all Google. So what I want to do is introduce the project. So what we're doing tonight is this panel conversation called New Polluters. And what got us thinking about this topic was a studio visit with Joan Linder about 2 years ago. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but my own realization that I had no idea this was happening in my own backyard. And I suspected I was not alone. So that got me thinking about a whole lot of issues that turned into this project called Waterfront View. And I just want to read it from my own notes because I'm a person that's done about 1 million things today. So in partnership with grassroots activism and community empowerment organizations, many of which are represented here today, Waterfront View is a series of exhibitions, workshops, and panel conversations that examine how late-stage capitalism has shifted the view of water and waterways from a resource of collective benefit to a commodity of individual interest and shareholder profit. So this is the core idea that is running through what is essentially 5 exhibitions, some workshops, and panel conversations. And we're about halfway through the Waterfront View series. So that's really what shaped this. And I do have to thank the funders that make this kind of programming possible, the first of which is the National Endowment for the Arts. But we also have to thank New York State and the NYSCA, New York State Council for the Arts. They not only fund us in general, but they also funded Joan Linder's project specifically. She was awarded a grant for an individual artist, which is very prestigious, so we're excited about that. We also are funded, yay Joan, by the James and Cameron Baird Foundation, the Warhol Foundation, the Oshai Foundation, and Erie County. I didn't want to forget about them. So I had to say thank you to all the wonderful folks that help us do what we're doing here. And M&T Bank, it's M&T 4th Friday. Thank you. It's been a long day. So I've introduced myself. I am going to just really quickly introduce also our staff. We have Lauren McLaughlin here, who's our operation manager. She is the person that is going to be fighting with the technology tomorrow, especially if folks don't speak right into the mic. We have Sydney Oshai here, who is our development and special events coordinator. We have Jane Hughes, who is our education director. She is not here today, but she will be working with Joan tomorrow and our amazing Jumpstart students. We have a really dynamic youth program here, and they're going to be drawing some of the industrial experiences here in the building, much under the tutelage of Joan. And then last but not least, our fearless leader, Macareo, our executive director. And I am going to just give a shout out to Nilson Rivera, who documents for us. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to ask each of you, so I think it does work best to kind of have mic buddies, for each of you to give sort of a 1-sentence introduction of yourself, and then we'll start with the questions. So go ahead. And that way I can also check if this is also sort of my mic check.
Good evening, everyone. Is this close enough, Shirley?
Perfect.
Okay, great. I'm Stephanie Rothenberg. I have the piece in the room next door. Unlike the factory floor, it's the escape room, which I think you've all experienced. I am in the Department of Art. I'm a professor, and I do work looking at the intersection of technology, science, and art.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bridge Rauch. I use they, them pronouns. I'm one of the organizers with the Clean Air Coalition in Western New York. And what we do is we organize with folks who are fence line residents. So folks live like, Let's try this one. There we go. Yes, we work with fence line residents, so folks who live adjacent to industrial sites or like former industrial sites. So they went away and they left the contamination in the ground, and folks are dealing with the health consequences.
Hi, I'm Deb Gondek. I am retired from Rich Products, where I was the Director of Sustainability there, which was kind of the start of my interest in environment and how it impacts a frozen food manufacturer. I've got some of my colleagues here tonight joining us. And since I retired, I've been active in our city of North Tonawanda on several things. I'm chair of our Climate Smart Communities Task Force, and also I'm currently leading an effort with some concerned citizens about a Bitcoin mining facility that's in our city. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
I'm Joan Linder. I'm an artist and I am a professor at UB, and I've had a practice where I largely work from life with drawing of a vast array of subjects that are usually close to me in some capacity, either coming from my home or a little bit further out geographically, and usually reflective of something that's going on around me.
Hi everyone, my name is Liz Cute. I'm a senior program manager at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, a local environmental nonprofit, and we do a lot of work. You might know the restoration of the Buffalo River, but I work more closely with a lot of our volunteer programs and lead some of our environmental education programs with local high schoolers, and am involved in some of our advocacy efforts related to water pollution.
Great mic management. So I wanted to start, Joan, with you. You know, I really started thinking about this after a studio visit that we had a couple years ago. And at that point, we were really just coming out of COVID, if you can imagine, 2022. And what struck me was this phrase that you used, this hidden in plain sight. And I feel like that is a thread that runs through both of these exhibitions and a lot of what we're talking about. When did you find out and start drawing the crypto mining facilities here in town? And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, the project I had done a larger project about looking at the toxic waste sites at Love Canal that spilled into, for me personally, the discovery of the radioactive waste sites, which was like a huge aha, exciting moment because I didn't know about them. And that was about a 6-year project, which I told myself I was not going to look at these really depressing subjects anymore. And then I read an article in the Buffalo News about the crypto mining, and I saw a photograph in it of the DigiHost servers on Buffalo Avenue up by the DuPont in Niagara Falls, by the DuPont chemical field. And I was so taken by the image and the article because it had not occurred to me that in fact there was crypto mining going on. So that must have been 2020, 2021. It was a while ago.
Great. And then, Bridge, could you give a brief description about what is happening when one is crypto mining? I know I watched a really informative documentary on PBS, and that helped me understand, but like maybe a minute or two.
Yeah. So if you Google this, you're going to see like a bunch of phrases like hash rate and a bunch of acronyms thrown at you. Ignore all that. Like what we're really talking about here is like computers all being, like a bunch of computers all being plugged in to just run and like generate random numbers, right? And one of those random numbers is a Bitcoin. And there's two methods, like two predominant methods. One of them is called proof of work. One of them is called proof of stake. Proof of work is used for generating most Bitcoin. So, you know, like Bitcoin and like, you know, Dogecoin or whatever. And it's basically, it's a competitive race. All these, like, you know, people are buying up a bunch of computers. You know, they're actually like, there's a bit of a competition between like gamers and the crypto bros about like, you know, about these like, you know, these high-powered computers. And so they're competing to like, you know, run all these computers all at once so that whoever gets like that random number at the right time gets the Bitcoin. Everybody else, all that energy that was used to generate that, it goes out the window. Proof of stake is where these computers all take turns. So, like Deb, you are like the person who's generating the Bitcoin right now. And then when Deb gets her Bitcoin, then my computer starts to like run it. So with mining, it's usually like these massive computer farms, usually in old industrial sites, because like it has the electrical infrastructure and has like a lot of ventilation infrastructure, that sort of thing. And it's just like all these computers running all at once to try and generate these random numbers. Proof of stake, used for Ethereum, you can just do that on like your home computer. You can do just one computer. It occasionally will fire up, and then like it's done. So yeah, that's the summary.
And so it uses a tremendous amount of energy.
Immense and exponential. It's actually like one of the environmental justice issues related to this is grid instability. Like I live on the west side, and like when we get brownouts, like there's like questions in my mind. Is that because like the energy was getting sucked up by one of these like crypto bros?
And I think this brings us to Deb, who when researching this and looking at activism, you have been active in organizing and creating some pushback. And if you can speak a little bit to that.
Sure. We were talking about kind of the hide in plain sight. And I think with cryptocurrency, specifically the Bitcoin operations that are popping up all over the country, all over the world, except for the countries that have outlawed it smartly, is that it's easy to hide in plain sight when you're a new and highly unregulated industry, when you're coming into these unsuspecting communities, touting and exaggerating, out and outright lying in many cases, the number of jobs that'll be created, not saying anything at all about the intense energy use, the electronic waste that's generated, the high noise levels, or the tremendous amount of water use in many of these cases. And then you get city officials that are so happy that someone's interested in coming to their town and bringing new high-tech, high-paying jobs, and they just fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. And because it's so new for communities, it's really challenging to get all the information that you need to get before your council votes on it or your planning commission votes on it. We're very fortunate to have organizations like Clean Air Coalition, Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, Earth Justice, and others to help us, but still that project got approved in September of 2021. All the concerns from residents and outside experts kind of fell on deaf ears. And as you can imagine, it's a lot harder to rectify the situation afterwards. So that's the situation in North Tonawanda.
I think it's interesting you said falling on deaf ears because it was the noise that got the residents organized to some degree.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of our concerns initially were the increased emissions. So they're taking a power plant that was a peaker plant, and that really is just supplying energy to the grid at intervals when there's high energy use and the grid needs a little extra, energy. So would probably operate about 10% capacity. Now it's 100% capacity and not for any public use at all, specifically to mine Bitcoin. So the noise is the most apparent issue, but there are many other concerns as well.
So, and I'm going to go down to Liz. I mean, do you think that if there hadn't been noise, that this issue would have been so public? I mean, as you're saying, you've got these organizations that are already here that know, but do you think to some degree that it was the fact that it was impacting people in the neighborhood's day-to-day life in the immediate? Because I think so much of when we talk about environmental justice, we know that down the road there's going to be a problem, but in the here and now it feels like people can ignore it. What do you think that impact was of that dramatic impact on their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think that really moved it forward, like Deb was saying, and you see it on Facebook public channels. People are talking about it, and that's been able to help people share their concerns and to find others that are experiencing similar things. Yeah, like you mentioned, most of the time, these impacts of pollution sometimes can take a year or decades, depending, to really feel the impact and to understand how it's impacting human life, wildlife, the ecosystem health. So sometimes it's more, down the line, and then it's too late, and then it's dealing with cleanup. But this noise is really helping, I think, hopefully pause, slow down, or eventually stop it from impacting future communities.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when I was thinking about this immediate impact, right? People's day-to-day lives being disrupted. And then I thought what was interesting is that Stephanie's project sort of is speculative, right? You're looking into this sort of future view of what could be, and there's something interesting, and for me as a curator, putting these exhibitions side by side and thinking about that contrast. So Stephanie, if you want to talk a little bit about your project, and how, it does relate to this idea of waterways, not to Bitcoin, but also to, what that view of nature, we talk about natural capital and about consumption, if you want to speak a little bit to that.
Sure. I feel maybe a good segue is that I have done a project about energy use and cryptocurrency and mining that is also about organisms and speculative. And I don't know how many people know about Geobacter, the bacteria that metabolizes toxins in brownfields. And within the way that it metabolizes, it produces energy. And so that's what microbial fuel cells are. And I mapped, this was a project in Chicago, I looked at all of the brownfields in relation to all the data processing centers and tried to calculate how many microbial fuel cells you would need to have a more sustainable way to produce the energy to power like this virtual economy, which of course is a little kind of a paradox within itself, because you're still, powering this somewhat, like whatever people are thinking in terms of like the neoliberal goals of cryptocurrency and bit mining. But in this project, I'm also speculating, but really more around the ethics of biotechnology and bioengineering, and looking at what it means more to, one, be sustainable, but then also what are the ethics of engineering these organisms for human benefit. And initially I was going to be looking more at the situation in the Great Lakes with the zebra and quagga mussels, but I haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
It did. It's just interesting. So can you just, and before you turn off your mic, speak a little bit then, because we're talking about art and activism. Can you talk about some of the aesthetic choices you made? And I'm going to ask Joan the same question, to bring this sort of heady conversation, what you just described. That's not an easy concept to get across in 2 minutes. You did very, very well. But how did you bring that into this aesthetic concept? We've talked a lot about, it's been great to hang out in the groovy purple haze. So talk a little bit, can you speak just a little bit about that, those aesthetic choices you're making while you were developing this concept and really building an installation?
Sure. The project plays on the myth of the oyster as an aphrodisiac. And so, I feel like anytime you want to deal with more serious issues, I always like to engage play. And whether you like oysters or not, people are always curious about, it's an aphrodisiac. So anytime you're talking about sex or sexual encounters, it's going to pique people's interest. And for younger people, they're either intrigued or they're like, ew, gross. So with all of my projects, I like them to be somewhat interactive and participatory. And I've been I want to thank you and Alma and my models, Lauren and Sydney, who have modeled. But to be able to engage with people in this has been part of it, to have these conversations and to use speculation and play to kind of be more ironic and hyperbolic about what the problems are in order to make them more visible. Like, you have seafood allergies, don't worry about it. It's, bioengineered. You're vegetarian, who cares? It's not a real organism anyways. So I think that is kind of part of making it more accessible.
And I think it's very successful. And Stephanie is going to be performing after, when we wrap up the conversation at 7. So I encourage you all, and you can decide if you want to drink any of the Aquadesia. And so, Joan, I'm going to ask you the same question. And as for me, I think especially with the video, I think it's really aesthetically compelling. But if you can speak a little bit to some of the choices you make and as you're making this artwork on this idea.
Yeah. Hi. Okay. Well, I just want to respond to something you said, Stephanie, which was you were talking about virtual economy and data centers, and just kind of frame that the work came out of looking at and reading about the crypto mining sites, but also sitting in COVID and feeling like complete screen addict. Screen was taking over everything. There were Amazon packages. Everything felt virtual meetings, all of that. And I became really interested in, is there a way to talk about the world of the screen, but really the reality of the world of the screen? Like, what's the back end of it? What does that look like? And that's a really big project. So I danced around a lot of things, often, and a thread in my work, which has been there for 25 years, is an interest in technology and the hand and painting, and finding a way to represent technology through drawing, painting, like just as a counterpoint to the thing itself. So that felt like a really good subject to take on the screen by drawing it, slowing it down, doing the exact opposite of what it does. And aesthetically, I landed on crypto because it was too hard to stay local and make a frame of data centers, in terms of sexiness. Like, crypto was like, what? I didn't know that was happening there. But you would be less surprised if I told you there's some data centers on Main Street. You'd be like, okay, it's just not as sexy. And also, data centers are sprawling. And then I had also really thought a lot about how to frame Amazon, because I was feeling like Amazon was totally inescapable, but the AWS web servers that run our entire lives, probably more than crypto, and use way more energy, were in Ohio, and I didn't want to drive to Ohio and sit in my car and draw like miles of data centers. It felt too overwhelming. So I decided to keep it local, and then with that, it became about how can I represent these. I've worked in this form before. I sat in my car with my notebook, and I sat by the side of the road, and I just did the drawing from life as a counterpoint. Like, here is what the back end of this international money generating thing looks like. It looks like an old industrial Rust Belt town, and there's something super high tech going on, making money for somebody maybe halfway across the world. And then the other way that I I had wanted to play around a little more with sculpture, so I recreated all of those Amazon boxes. But it could have been, and those were just the Amazon boxes that were coming into my house, or a few from school. So that was like, I'll make it out of paper and my hand, and I won't use any of the tech, which I didn't not use any of it, I used some of it. But that process is very slow, and I wanted to show a little more of what is around town. I did do a drawing of the crypto site on Buffalo Avenue in Niagara Falls. That was one of the first ones, as well as the BU5 fulfillment center out in Lancaster, because we have 3 fulfillment centers in the area, one in Hamburg, Lancaster, and Tonawanda. And then I paired that. I wanted to show more of the crypto mining sites, because I think they're really fascinating and incredible. So it would be like 5 years for me to make all those drawings. So I worked with Anna Curetta Lavatelli, and we went around town and shot a video. But I also didn't want to focus just on the sites. I wanted to focus on the context. So it's the site, whether it's a crypto site or fulfillment center, and then what's across the street, so that you can see who's living there. With in the center of the video is Niagara Falls, because that's what is fueling, of course, all of the currency.
And the video is really stunning visually, and the palette is so calm, right? And why would anyone get upset? But I think one of the things, and that's, I'm going to go back to Bridge, I think it is interesting, and I wrote about this in the essay, that these aren't in Williamsville or Clarence or Orchard Park. These are strategic and neighborhoods where the attention of our community and our government tends not to be, and certainly not meeting the needs of the community, the least powerful among us. And Bridge, what was the term you said? Chain fence or?
Fence line.
Fence line. So if you could speak a little bit to that, because I think, in fact, there are fences, Joan drew the fences. I think it's a really interesting, and I had not heard that term before. And friends, this is why we do this. Like, that was an aha moment for me that you just used that term. It makes so much sense. But if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so there's two terms you'll hear a lot from environmental justice and climate justice folks. One is frontline residents. So those are the folks who are being affected first and worst by the effects of climate change. So let's say you have a basement apartment in New York City, and anytime there's a big flood event, your apartment gets flooded out. You are a frontline resident. Fence line, I'm not exactly sure where I first read that term, but it's kind of a Venn diagram with like the frontline residents that and it's, like I said, it's folks that live like right next to like the fence or like are affected by the pollution from these facilities. And what we also see quite often are the facilities closed, but it left all their crap behind. So like folks that are living next to Superfund and brownfield sites, we have like within the city of Buffalo, like Superfund and brownfield sites. American Axle is a Superfund and brownfield site. And it's like literally across the street from people's homes, and there's a lot of concerns that folks have that how has this like affected us? Do we have a situation where these contaminants have like leached out like into our neighborhood? So yeah, it's a Venn diagram, that you might be a fence line resident, you might be a frontline resident, and you might be both, and that's always a really fun situation to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too to notice how often those fences are chain link. Like, that's going to keep the toxins out, right? It's just going to keep the people from going into the site. Yeah, it's interesting.
I would be remiss to say that if I forgot to mention this was a very purposeful decisions that were made by these facilities, but also by municipalities. We zoned to we used our zoning code to set it up so that certain neighborhoods disproportionately have the impact from these industries. And if you take those maps and you put it over the redlining map and racial segregation maps and everything else, it all aligns. So it's very specifically targeting certain communities to be we're going to have you be the ones who pay the cost for this industrial society we live in.
Right, and those least able to those with the least power, and that's something we see a lot. I do want to just pivot a little bit to water, because that is part of our theme, and to Liz. So when we think about things, what we're not seeing, what is hiding in plain sight, or not even really hidden all that well, can you speak to maybe, I found out about crypto mining because of Joan's drawings, but can you speak to maybe some of the things that maybe some of us aren't aware of? Because right now, everything on the waterfront is, it's carousels and concerts, right? What can you speak a little bit to maybe some of the other things we ought to maybe know about or be paying a little bit more attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of things that impact water or in the water or the sediment below the water that can have a lot of really serious negative impacts on wildlife, humans, the ecosystem, and you can't see them, right? They're invisible at the chemical level. You need expensive tests at a lab to show you they're there and to what quantity. So we're still living with a lot of these kind of invisible chemicals, legacy contaminants. A lot were dredged and removed from the Buffalo River, but there's legacy or old pollution in a lot of other industrial areas that have run off into waterways like Skajackwada Creek. So these are old pollutants that are now regulated a lot better, like PCBs, dioxins, things that are carcinogens. But we're still living with their legacy through the wildlife. So we have a lot of fish consumption advisories in our region. But the water looks clean, but the fish, they look okay, but depending on who you are, you might not want to eat many of them. So there's the legacy contaminants that have worked their way up the food chain to us. And there's also, chemical industry is always ahead of, a step ahead. Things get regulated, well, let's create an alternative that works in the same way, but isn't regulated yet. So that we're dealing with emerging contaminants now. One example that we've been trying to get a sense as to where they're at in our local environment is PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So these were made and created and have a lot of really interesting, useful properties, but can cause serious health impacts and are long-lived or forever chemicals because they don't break down very easy. So we're still learning about how these are impacting people, if they end up in well water or municipal water, what's the impact on us? And it's, again, these things you cannot see, and there are not regulations in many facets for them yet. So we're trying to catch up, but there are 12,000 plus types of these chemicals. So there's a lot of things you can't see that are quietly, silently impacting people, and like Bridge mentioned, impacting certain communities more than others, which is really unfortunate.
So Deb, I'm going to go back to you and ask you, how did you organize your community? Because it was, I've seen the videos on the news. It isn't all my leftist friends. It's your neighbors. It's just, you did a great job. What did you do to activate and organize your neighborhood?
Well, it's interesting because the way I even found out that this DigiHost project was under consideration was a flyer that a neighbor was distributing around our street, and I'm like, Bitcoin. I was like, I don't really understand what that is. They're talking about electricity use, and I'll go to this Common Council meeting and find out more. And that's where we saw the CEO of DigiHost giving the craziest presentation I've ever seen. I've never seen so much greenwashing in a PowerPoint presentation in my life. They did offer...
Can you just say what greenwashing is?
Oh, sorry. Greenwashing is when you make vague and unsubstantiated claims that you're doing something really great for the environment when in reality you're doing just the opposite.
I think we're doing a little purple washing in Aquadasia.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Go ahead and continue.
So, there was opportunity for questions after this presentation, and I had a lot of them, and so did others in the room. And the answers were the same vague lines to, regardless of what your question was, you still got the same answer. And it just seemed a little fishy to me that the chair of our Common Council was already endorsing this project without, before it had even gone to our planning commission and things like that. So the whole thing, from a lack of transparency at the local government level, was really frustrating. And if you don't attend these meetings, you don't really get a chance to see what's going on. So that was part of it, because you've got where this Bitcoin plant is situated on Erie Avenue. It's that part of Erie Avenue is zoned industrial, but there are residential areas all surrounding it. So, we can't hear the noise from our house, but hundreds of residents within a mile of this facility are bothered by it. They can hear it in their homes with the windows closed. It's, if you've never heard it, it's or felt it, it's an annoying hum, kind of like if you're sitting on the tarmac at the airport, and it's got this odd vibration that also accompanies it, which is really disturbing. So the long-term health impacts of constant exposure to that level of noise is problematic. And right now the EPA is not really enforcing the noise standards they have, that were developed in the 1970s. They've kind of said, yeah, we don't. This was unfunded, so now all the local municipalities have to take care of this. And our local municipality, like many others, we are not in a position to have the noise equipment to constantly monitor this to the degree that it would hold up in court if we were to take, DigiHost to court saying you're operating at noise levels well beyond our noise control ordinance. And the other thing we found throughout this was that our own noise ordinance is outdated. It's 35 years old, and it has really some vague wording. And one of our neighbors, who's a kind of a weather noise expert, he's the one that made us realize that the decibel readings in our ordinance don't even capture the type of low frequency industrial noise that's being generated by these Bitcoin facilities. So now we're also in the process of doing formal noise monitoring and updating our noise ordinance. So that's some of the work that's going to be taking place during this 2-year moratorium that got passed. So that's how we, kind of got the neighbors together. We've early on in, February of 2022, when they first started the testing, that's when the noise really became apparent. And if people weren't up in arms already about the increased emissions and the 500,000 gallons a day water use, the noise really brought this thing to a head. So, but even, getting 300 plus people signing a petition and taking that to the Common Council, again, falling on deaf ears. And we finally said, all right, after 2 years, 2 years is too long to not have this addressed. We're going to go in with a presentation to our council with some ideas that we were able to learn from communities all across the country that are dealing with similar issues. So we said we want a 2-year moratorium on any Bitcoin mining, new Bitcoin mining in the city, and expansion. So DigiHost, our council passed it. So it's here to stay for the time being. Hopefully not much longer. But they're not allowed to expand, so they can't make the problem worse. But then again, we have to stay on it. We have to have volunteers in our community on this noise monitoring committee to make sure it's being done right. We have to have volunteers that are working with our city officials to make sure this noise ordinance gets improved and then voted on. So it just never lets up. It's a constant babysitting, if you will, for a lot of it.
That's really interesting. And I'm going to come back to you then, Stephanie. Did you, in your research, look at these greenwashing ways in which industries were sort of selling their crappy science?
Their crappy science.
Lack of a better word.
Yeah, I started, this project actually started years ago when I had a fellowship at Bowdoin College on the Gulf of Maine, and coming from a state school and going to a private, well-endowed liberal arts school was fascinating. Students go on immersive trips to Hawaii as part of the curriculum, and I was like, can I come? But I started to learn about aquaculture, right? And I think, just learning about it on a small scale, on a more sustainable scale, because the Gulf of Maine, that water body is like warming faster than most. And so the fishermen, the lobster fishermen, they have to keep going further and further out because lobster is like really cold water to breed, and it becomes more and more expensive. And so Maine has been trying to figure out how to help support small-scale aquaculture, but it's when it scales up, right? And we see like all along the coast of China and other countries when it becomes extractive, and you start to have all the issues with the toxins in the water, and so I think for me, it's really the myths around that. And I've actually been wanting to go to Hawaii because there's some, like the whole blue economies phenomena. And just for me, the term natural capital is really problematic, and so much contradictions within the fields of conservation and ecosystem services. And so I feel there is a lot of greenwashing with that. That's part of sort of the fantastical, techno-utopian aspect of this project, right? But really kind of using humor with this term aquadesia, that this armchair philanthropy, we could just drink the water and transcend all of our climate change problems. But I did want to, we're going to ask.
Could you just define natural capital for people quickly? I know I came upon that term when I was writing your catalog essay, but I'm not sure that everybody's going to know what it means.
Sure. I mean, it's just really a term to commodify nature and to quantify it and enable it to be a comparable asset that could be like traded on the market to some extent. And that's also what ecosystem services is. And when you look at models of ecosystem services, the human is always in the center. So.
Then go ahead with what the other you were going.
Well, I'm just really interested in terms of environmental issues in the phenomena of sound. And sound is an environmental detriment. And it's something I think that's new. Like, I've been looking more at underwater sound. But in terms of, I wanted to call your club the headache club of listening to that kind of drone. But it was more of kind of a comment that I find that, oh, right, yeah. But that this is right, because we have to go to like new levels, right? Like there's new metrics for how when it becomes a problem, right, and an environmental factor. So I just thought it was really interesting hearing that, because I was curious about, yeah.
It also seems very convenient that these systems of regulation, right, municipalities, don't have ways to measure the thing they're supposed to be managing, right? I mean, isn't that convenient? Oh, wow. If you want to speak.
Yeah, just
Go ahead.
like a couple things I wanted to say, because once you were talking about sound, that was the other reason I made the video, was so that you could hear the sound. So that's a really important component. And, the plant is in the video, so you can go and listen to what crypto mining sound is. But I think it's when you're talking about getting ahead of these chemicals that we have yet to be, able to be measured. That's what the sound is for us. And it's interesting because it's like we're seeing it from the human side mostly, but I've also read a fair amount of articles that it's really disruptive of wildlife, and not so different than if you think about the cables that are running through the ocean that are connecting our cloud, which is ostensibly what crypto is part of, which is also, affecting, that ecosystem as well. So it all kind of ties in these different ways. That's all I wanted to add.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying too, though, Joan, about hidden in plain sight, not even considering, and even this ties back to you too, Stephanie, from this human point of view, if it's not bothering us, it's not a problem. And not acknowledging, and I think as much as, aquadesia is fantastical, and along with some of your other projects, this idea that what if it's not capital, and what if, humans are not at the top of the pyramid consuming, but if we're looking to a more collaborative, cooperative solution to nature and to our eco problems, it becomes really interesting. And that shift in mindset is, it's pretty profound.
I was just going to say there's this a phrase or a question that if you're looking at a new project or something else, and the question is, okay, well, what if everybody did that? It's these one-offs that kind of get us into trouble, right? You think, oh, this is a neat new technology or a neat new product, and not looking at the entire life cycle of it, or scaling it up and understanding what would this planet be like, or what would life be like if everybody was doing it, good or bad.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get into our own bubble, to say the least. I know this has been fascinating, and I can continue the conversation, but do we have any questions from the audience? I want to engage people. here, let me give you the microphone. I am going to do that so that otherwise what happens is we have this really bizarre thing on the video where there's a period of silence and then somebody says something really interesting, but you don't know why. So at this point, if anybody has questions, I am going to hand you the mic and ask that you answer it. Ask it in the mic.
Hey everyone, thank you for doing this. So I love Joan and Stephanie, the work, it's amazing. One thing it makes me think about is AI, which I'm terrified about, not for the reasons that most people are terrified about it, but because of the energy use. And it feels like crypto is just the opening act of AI. I mean, the logarithmic potential of AI is hard to fathom. And you have people like Bill Gates saying, oh, the benefits we're going to get in, you know, efficiency are going to outweigh any energy we spend. Maybe that's true right now. I feel like it's a movie we've seen before of how our problems are going to be solved by this amazing technology that comes. But anyway, I was just in the work that you all are doing related to crypto here. Do you have any insights about AI and where that's going? And, you know, just a little note is UB right now is just obsessed with AI and trying to get all of us to reorient all of our research around AI. Yeah.
What you see a lot at these like industrial sites and also at like, you know, research institutions are these quote unquote data centers, right? You know, and like cryptocurrency, you know, is just the most obnoxious example, you know, of like the use of these data centers. You know, it's just drawing from the grid and like, you know, it's just producing like income inequality, you know, is what it's producing. But AI, you know, it's so efficient. Oh, I know. Yeah, yeah. AI, you know, there is some nuance, right? You know, it's like, you know, with research institutions that there is some cool stuff that's happening, like, you know, discovering, you know, being able to identify breast cancer at an earlier stage, you know, and like, you know, just I was reading something about like RNA analysis the other day. That, you know, so there are some research analyses, you know, use of AI that, you know, it's you know, it's a public good. But then there's also, you know, figuring out how to make all of us obsolete in our jobs, you know, or you know, making terrifying, you know, artwork that, you know, has like 8 fingers and it's stealing artwork from the actual artists to do that. So my perspective on AI is that it really, like, we need it to be a public good, so usually done within like research, you know, institutions or within like governmental like institutions. And if you are making a private, you know, industrial use of it, you have to make a case for like why, you know, how is this going to benefit us? This also brings up though, another point that I think is important is that we're in the middle of this massive energy transition, right? So, you know, like we have like, you know, under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, we had a very clear roadmap for how New York State was going to get to like 100% renewables by 2030. All of these new data centers are they're massively upending all of those predictions. You know, and you know, so like we really like it's a new industry, so like we're going to need new regulations, and you know, like we're going to have to like have our government officials like pass rules, you know, about, you know, like what is like how are we using our energy? Like you know, I need to be able to plug my phone in a couple times a day, you know, and if I can't do that, you know, like because somebody is like trying to run like a Bitcoin mine, that's absurd, you know, and you know, it's like, yeah.
I'd say, Joan, you seem to.
So I was just going to build on what Bridge is saying here, just to kind of take it back to the local level. So the DigiHost Bitcoin mining facility in North Tonawanda, in 1 year, they are using enough electricity to power 165,000 homes. We have 30,000-ish homes in North Tonawanda. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective on the energy use of just one Bitcoin mining company in one little town in New York State. So again, what if everybody did that? You multiply that out, and it doesn't, at least not that we're aware of, there doesn't seem to be anyone that's looking at this holistically to project out what this energy demand is going to be and how we're going to fulfill that. So don't give people the keys to the car until you figured out how we're gonna manage that. Because once that genie's out of the bottle, it's going to be super hard to put it back in.
Sorry, one other point. As part of the energy industry transition, the petrochemical industry is really like struggling to figure out how they're going to keep going. So there's a lot of linkages between the traditional fossil fuel industry and the growing like data center industry. The same site developer at American Axle is the same site developer at Tano-on-a-Coke, and he was on the board of DigiHost for a little while, it's like there's I feel like I'm drawing crazy red lines and all that, but it really is like there is like a network of to keep the petrochemical industry and the going is directly connected to data centers. So
I think, John, to bring it back to your question for me, and that's really where part of this project came out of, was just bringing more to the fore this notion of the energy consumption that we are all part of. It's not really crypto's the bad guys. We're all completely culpable, as well as our policies and all of that. You have to plug your phone in, I have to plug my phone in, we all watch movies, it just, and I think that's kind of the only way. The genie's already so far out of the bottle. How are you going to pull that AI back in? It's 10 times, six times higher or something than a typical data center. It was 10 kilowatt hours to 60 or something per a row of machinery. But I wouldn't even say it's really about keeping the petrochemical industry going at all, because I think this kind of gets into these interesting places of greenwashing. They were talking about reopening nuclear power plants to fuel this. American Axle has companies in it that I think are building long batteries that are actually green, so it has its own contradictions within the businesses that are within it while it's on that site. Some of these sites have radioactive waste in them, and then you're talking about building nuclear sites to fuel, my cell phone recharge and all the data everybody's collecting on us ad infinitum. So I think in that sense, it's about trying to have a bigger conversation than putting a little X on crypto or something like that. To say, I like the way you put it, that's so, it's so absurd and sexy, which is how I landed on it as a framing to start to talk about it. But, for me, the boxes were just as well, because I was horrified when I learned that Amazon runs my life. It runs all the platforms that I use. Do you know which platforms they run? I think that those are, and how much energy is consumed. So yeah. Anyways.
I think it's interesting that and these academics are talking about UB and AI, and I'm always struck at the resources that have gone into teaching computers to think, and if only those resources had gone into teaching people. It's so disparate. When you really look at and I'm sort of saying it as a joke, but I'm also really honest. When you think about the technology and the money and the energy, if only UB was putting the same effort into educating humans. It's this, I don't know, it's a really, and this, I guess, comes back somewhat to Stephanie and to the art. Of course artists are talking about this because it's absurd, right? How do we talk about this in a literal way, I don't know, without crying? It's pretty crazy stuff. So before I get too far into my own head, okay, let's hand the mic for some more questions.
So, Joan's right. Energy demand reduction is really the main, one of the main problems I see. I'm an environmentalist, and so I got into Bitcoin through the Greenwich factory on Seneca Lake, which originally we were fighting it because they wanted to convert a dust-binned coal plant into a fracked gas peaker plant. So that was bad enough. That's encouraging more fracking and everything. So we fought that. No, it's just going to be a peaker plant. It's not going to be used that much. Bait and switch, quick bait and switch. So right now there's a lot going on with that plant as well. And the company, which is, I don't know what the name of them is, they keep switching their names, but they're suing the DEC and saying that, let me read this here, the DEC can't deny air permits because of the CLCPA. There's a hearing this Tuesday if anybody wants to drive down with me, because if this is determined in their favor, that sets a really amazing precedent against the CLCPA and the DEC. And that'll just give them, then they can just keep going, but they will. It's greed. So there was something else. I mean, it's so many things. So it's just, but brilliant work, both Joan and Stephanie. Thank you for putting that out there.
And were there any other questions? Oh, so many questions. Okay. Actually, I'm going to go back this way that I can walk forward because there's an empty seat here.
Thanks. I have the privilege of working with Bridge and venting about this stuff every day, so it's good to see. It's good to see Bridge in action, just getting it out, like talking about this stuff. I just wanted to point out when it comes to the noise factor, I just ironically went to a presentation at UB today with an epidemiologist from Harvard, and she talked about noise as a factor that came out higher than particulate matter when it comes to health disparities. It was particular to like heart attacks, but there was all kinds of different research that they did. And in noise, it was noise, PM 2.5, particulate matter, smaller than 2.5 microns, and socioeconomic status. But in a lot of our campaigns, noise was the factor that got people involved. We have a concrete crushing operation that we worked on. We have a tire shredding operation, and all those produce particulate matters, but the noise factor was the thing that got people involved. So I don't know if anybody else wants to, Dev or Bridge wants to add to that, but I just wanted to point that out, that I just came across that today earlier.
I mean, is it because noise does move beyond the fence line? Right, you're talking about, is that part of it?
Yeah, and I think that is part of it, because it travels so far. There are a lot of variables on how far and how fast it will travel. And the health studies related to the long-term impacts of this exposure to constant high noise levels, it's just starting to emerge. And being, credible studies about this. So again, it's playing catch up with something we've allowed to happen for, not just Bitcoin mining, but noise and other, factors of our lives as well. So being able to, get the EPA to take some action on this and support these laws that are on the books, but no one's supporting right now, that would be one step in the right direction. So we're actually working with Earth Justice on a petition for that. So if people are interested in signing, we can get you that information, because it really we're going to need action and effort at the local level and at the federal level to make this really take some get some what am I trying to say here? Traction. Thank you.
I'm going to ask that all of you that have mentioned your links, but I know when you find the link that you were talking about, the Earth Justice. So we are recording this video tonight. We are going to put it on the website for this event, and it is under panel conversations, which is under our special events tab. But Lauren is our brilliant tech manager. So as you send those, we will add those. So please go to the site and find out. This is a way. We also, when we're done here, which we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, because I think one of the most important things that happen with these conversations is the conversation that happens after and the networking. one of the reasons we have been working in this model where we bring together artists and activists is that this intersection of thought is fantastic, but then this cross-pollination of creativity and science and the conversations that emerge, I think this has been fascinating tonight. And this model really, really works. So I'm going to let Jim ask his question, and then we'll start to wrap up. But so yes, you can send it. You can send it Shirley at buffaloartstudio.org. It's pretty darn easy, and you can send the link off the website so you don't misspell anything like I would.
My question is of a more basic one related to crypto, which is I heard a couple of times about the amount of water used on a daily basis. Is that for cooling purposes, and I guess regardless of what it's used for, why it's needed in that process, what happens to the water as a result? How is it contaminated either chemically or through elevated temperature level? And what impact does then that have on the immediate environment?
Yeah, cooling mostly for industrial uses to cool the machines that are really warm. And then, right, where does it go? Some industries in the past, right, wastewater would go directly into, say, the Buffalo River, and then the water temperature would increase. That impacts wildlife survival. But this plant is inland. It's not directly by a creek or a river, so it would be entering the wastewater system to then be treated. So I'm assuming they have the permits to do this. They know the specifics on this plant.
So for North Tonawanda, the 500,000 gallons of water per day is used actually right? Isn't that crazy? And our city's response was, well, that's great because we have capacity, so that's additional revenue. So that's actually used. So this is a natural gas and steam plant. So a lot of the water is used to actually not cool the computers. They're using fans to cool the computers in our case. So that's what's generating all the noise. It's not necessarily the power plant that generates a moderate amount of noise. It's these computers, 4,000 of them in stacked shipping containers outdoors, and the fans to cool them that is generating this obnoxious noise. So the water, the 500,000 gallons of water a day, so because it's a steam plant, some of that will evaporate. So there's particulates in that, right, for that process. And then another, I think it was 200,000 gallons a day will be pumped back through our wastewater system. And again, superheated water going through an aging infrastructure. So even though in our case, it's not being discharged directly to waterways in that superheated form, it's going through a sewer system that the pipes are old, and what does something at that temperature do to a system that's on the verge anyway? Now in Seneca Lake, their situation was a little different and a little more drastic. They were pumping, the Bitcoin company there was pumping superheated water directly into Seneca Lake. So that's impacting the wildlife there, algae blooms, the fishing industry, the winery, the tourism industry suffered there. So each situation is a little different, but there's just something about the water use that is common in terms of wasteful practices for this.
All right, I think I am going to stick to this is 5 minutes over. If you know me, I run a tight ship. So I do want to thank you all again for coming. I mean, I think bringing these groups of folks together is amazing. I really want you to, and we're going to turn the sound back up on the installation. I also want to ask Betty Leader to raise her hand. She's an artist here in our community. She has a studio, and she has been working as an artist and an activist regarding plastics and waterways, etc. Her studio is open. There are a lot of artists working in these activist position. So I think for those of you that are coming maybe from the activist organizations, to know that this is something that is moving through the arts community. And in fact, Bridge wanted to make a quick pitch, so go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, cacwny.org/donate, always never going to say no to that. But two, we are currently recruiting board members, and we really want to get someone from a creative field on our board. So if you're a musician, if you're a graphic artist, like a sculptor, just anybody with from a creative background, we would love to have you on board. It's crucial to, having arts, in our work is crucial to help us tell our story. And organizing is quite a bit about shifting narratives and getting people to understand these issues and being able to break down pretty complicated issues in a way that people can digest it. So anybody here, you want to chat with me, Chris, my friend Cindy's in the back there as well. We'd love to chat with you about, joining our board. So, yeah.
Terrific. Once again, thank you all for coming. We generally, in the next 3 or 4 minutes, is a little chaotic because we try and sweep up some of the chairs and the sound equipment, but the gallery is open until 8. We do have snacks. I know many of you came right from work. Joan and Stephanie are going to be here to talk about their artwork. We're going to, but we really just encourage you to network, to exchange ideas, because I think that's it's interesting that people can be thinking about the same things, but thinking about them so differently. And that's when you talk about bringing creative people to your board. That's part of the power of these programs. So thank you all. If you are interested in knowing more about these kind of programs, go on our website. We do have an email list. We have a very active social media. And just, follow what we're doing. This is not an isolated project. This is very much at the heart. It is not just environmental activism, but it's social activism, racial, economic justice. These are central to what the work we do here. So I encourage you to get to know us a little bit better. Again, thank you to the amazing, amazing panelists, so knowledgeable, so interesting. And thank you to M&T Bank for funding Fourth Fridays. And thank you all for coming on a Halloween weekend. Enjoy. Thank you so much.